rentals, you can do short-term Airbnb rentals, vacation rentals, long-term rentals, so many different ways to make money. But this is my chosen strategy for investing. What is a midterm rental? They are usually 30-plus day rentals, so they don't fall in the same category as a short-term Airbnb. That's often, you're booking a weekend stay or maybe a week-long and whatnot. So it's 30-plus day rentals, but it's oftentimes not the same thing as the long-term rental. You have someone renting an apartment for a year or a house for a year. They are often fully furnished, but again, opposed to a long-term rental but it's not furnished. And you pay utilities as the landlord. So instead of, doing this generally when you're a tenant, you set up utilities in your own name. This time as the landlord, you are paying utilities. And it may also include added extra amenities. So who are the tenants? Oftentimes traveling nurses, that's a huge market for the midterm rental space. Also, potentially corporate professionals, maybe someone going to a new city for a contract or doing some consulting work or whatnot. Even, for example, I met a person in Minneapolis before I left there who was in town doing a sales job for about 7 months, and he didn't know about the fully furnished midterm rentals. So he found an apartment, furnished it all by himself, kind of, properly, just trying to do it cheap because he's there just for the short term. But when I told him about what I was doing, renting my place fully furnished, he wanted to get on that because he didn't want to have to work on furnishing a place himself. And also digital nomads, such as Kevin and his lifestyle businesses. There are a lot of people working remotely these days. They can work from anywhere. So that's a really growing part of the midterm rental space as well. So why is midterm rental best? Let's look at some of the differences. There's pros and cons to everything between long-term and midterm. So with long-term rentals, oftentimes you see a lot less cash flow. And a long-term rental might even only cash flow about $100, maybe $200 per month. So as you can tell, that would take a lot of rentals to get to basically financial independence, any type of real substantial cash flow. You also might run into costly deferred maintenance when you have tenants who are renting for a year, maybe even more. They're in there for multiple years. There's a lot that can deteriorate over that time. So once they finally get up, you have a lot of costly maintenance. Whereas with midterm rental, they're in there a lot shorter period of time, so you're able to get into space, assess things, and do more maintenance as they come up. You also have a lot greater cash flow because you're renting for shorter periods of time, and since it's fully furnished, again, added amenities, you can charge a higher price. With the long terms, there's a lot greater potential for evictions. You don't know who's in your space long term, what could happen with their jobs. In the midterm rental space, generally, again, they're there for a very short period of time. A traveling nurse, for example, they have a contract, a 3-month contract, they're making very good money, so you have a lot less chance of missed rent. Tenants may be harder on the property in a long-term rental space. Again, you don't know who's in there. It might be a family. People are there a long time. They start thinking of the property as their own, even though you rent it or you own it, and they're just renting, versus someone in there for maybe 3 months at a time. They very much know that's not their own space, and they kind of feel lighter. So with midterm rentals, there's a lot of benefits over the long-term rental space. In the short-term space, they do have the potential to be cash cows. You can make a lot of money with Airbnb vacation rentals. However, there's also a lot more competition. The short-term rental space is really dominated by designers these days. You really have to have a space that's kind of luxury. It's really dialed in, all the decor and everything. In the midterm rental space, there's still a lot of room to stand out. You still want your space to be stylish. You want it to be desirable. However, it doesn't necessarily have to have quite the same bells and whistles as a luxury short-term rental. And there's a lot less competition in this space, so there's still room to stand out. With short-term rentals, you have increased operating costs. You're doing cleaning a lot more often, as people leave maybe every couple of days, every week. There's a lot more cleaning costs and whatnot that go into that. Also the supplies. Whereas with a midterm rental, you kind of give your tenants a starter supply kit, maybe enough toilet paper and things like that to get them going for the first few days, first week. But with a short-term rental, you have to provide that stuff for their entire stay. Short-term rentals, you also might have less favorable tax treatment, Airbnbs and whatnot. You may even see a hotel tax up to 18%, whereas a midterm rental is actually treated like a long-term rental legally. So you don't have the same types of taxes. And they can also be, the short terms can be riskier. As legislation changes constantly, there are whole cities that are outlawing Airbnb short-term rentals, and in other cities you're kind of fighting for, you're fighting for the right to do it. Your business model can change if the city decides to get rid of it. Whereas midterm rentals, again, since they're treated as a long-term rental, the legislation and the tax treatment is far more favorable. There can also be a lower barrier of entry to midterm rentals. Both with short-term and long-term rentals, a lot of times what does really well are bigger houses, a lot more bedrooms, things like that. Whereas a midterm rental, oftentimes kind of the misfit properties are the ones that can really succeed and excel because you don't need as much space. It's oftentimes someone traveling by themselves, maybe just a couple. So smaller condos, small 1 and 2 bedroom houses, kind of those misfit properties that may also have a lower price point to get into. They can be really excellent. So let's talk a little bit more about traveling nurses, because this is who I have decided to focus on marketing to for my properties. Typical contract length for a traveling nurse is 3 to 6 months. And there's also growing demand in the industry as medical professionals burn out left and right. Hospitals are left with spaces to fill. So there's growing room for more and more traveling nurses. Many of them are single women in their 20s and 30s. And they have good salaries and a housing stipend. Again, that's why it makes it a much safer investment. You're almost guaranteed to be paid rent because they're making very good money on top of their housing being covered as well by their job. And they're only there for a short time. They are also willing therefore to pay a higher price point if they really like your space, if they find it's really cute. They're making good money and they want to stay there, so they're going to treat themselves to your space if they really like it. And there are more couples traveling together now. Again, with so many jobs being remote, it's becoming more common where someone might take their spouse or their significant other along with them as they go on their contract. So what makes a good midterm rental? As in all real estate, location is key. Especially again, as we looked at the last page, a lot of traveling nurses are single women, and so they want to feel safe. You want to be in a good area of town. You want the property to be well lit. They might be coming and going at all hours of the night for their weird, crazy shifts. So location is key. You also want it to be near a hospital. When looking at potential properties, looking up in the area where the level 1 trauma centers are is always a good place to start because they will absolutely have travel nurses employed there. Stylish or attractive furnishings, again, these are people who are making a good salary so they can afford something nice and they want to stay somewhere cute. So again, studios and 1 and 2 bedroom properties can make a really good midterm rental as it's often someone traveling by themselves or maybe just a couple. A comfortable bed, full kitchen, all the basic cookware and appliances are also needed to make a good midterm rental. And added amenities like a pool or fitness center can also be great. So there are expenses, of course, as in any business. You have to make sure you're calculating this, what the mortgage is, HOA, if it applies, taxes, insurance. You're paying utilities, so you do have to account for that. Closing costs if you're buying a new property, any agent commissions, these are all things you want to consider when looking at your cash flow. If you're doing any renovations and repairs, that needs to be looked at in advance. Your costs for furnishing, decorating, Professional photography, you want your listing to stand out. And of course, costs for cleaning, listing sites. For example, where I list my property, it's a $900 fee once a year. And services such as DocuSign for signing leases. There's really good potential for cash flow with midterm rentals. Again, since it is a shorter term, you can charge a lot higher rate. But there are expenses that you want to make sure you're taking out every month so that you do keep cash flowing in the long term and you don't run into problems with big expenses. So a good rule of thumb when looking at a new property is account for 8% vacancy rate, a 5% CapEx, 5% maintenance and repairs, and 10% property management fee. Now, in reality, these numbers might be different. They might be lower. For example, I don't property manage. I self-property manage my own property, so I don't have that fee whatsoever. And maybe if you're buying a brand new renovated place, you also might not need to account for a whole 5% for both CapEx and maintenance. And of course, you just subtract all of the monthly expenses from the income to see what your cash flow actually is. Now, there are other metrics that are important to look at, but that's what I'll focus on for today. Where do you find tenants? There's a whole site called Furnished Finder that is specialized in helping nurses find their accommodations. You can also list on Airbnb, Vrbo, use Facebook groups, and whatnot. So these are actually some photos of my condo in Minneapolis. I did live here first. I became what we call an accidental landlord when I decided to move out of my place, but I didn't want to sell it. I wanted to rent it. So it's a downtown condo in Minneapolis, and I can rent it right now for $19.99 per month, and it cash flows about $500 a month after all of the expenses. I also have decided to charge a $500 non-refundable deposit, so I don't have to deal with sending money back to them, and that's kind of what I use to cover some of those expenses of the CapEx and maintenance. My next investment, I'm working on getting a second condo here. I'm working with a partner. He is the equity partner. I'm the household partner. He's bringing in the money, and I have the knowledge on both finding the property, underwriting it, and property management. So I will be doing all the leases and finding the tenants, and it will cash flow approximately $1,000 a month because we are buying in cash. We have plans for growth later, so we will be reinvesting our cash flow into other properties, and also we will be able to take out equity and place it into something else. So next steps, if you're finding yourself wanting to invest yourself and you don't know where to start, I would say educate yourself, maybe find a mentor, someone you can talk to, do market research on where you are looking to invest, and consider partnering on a deal, because like others have mentioned, 0% of zero is still zero. So if you're splitting something with someone else, you might be more profitable than going in on something on your own, but never actually taking that step, never actually starting. And these are some resources and tools. There's some websites, books, and things that are really helpful when starting this journey. If anyone wants to take any of those down. Thank you. Yeah, does anyone have any questions?
Do you screen your tenants hard, or do you like target specific like
Just like two questions.
Let me ask this because one of my friends ran into one of the tenants issues.
Yeah, I do screen my tenants. You don't have to screen traveling nurses quite as much as you would another tenant in a long-term rental, just another one of the benefits, because they are very heavily screened just to be in their jobs. But I do check for things. I do a background check that they pay for, and that also checks their credit, which I actually see a full list of how many debts they have, so you can kind of see like exactly how likely it is that for them to pay you versus not. And I do ask just for verification of their employment, so that I know that I'll get paid.
Because of your 30-day minimum stays, is that 8% vacancy like pretty accurate for the year?
Yeah, per year, it is pretty accurate. I'm learning better ways too on how to get that vacancy rate down even lower, and probably, I've had, I'd say like maybe a week between my tenants so far, but I'm learning ways to kind of get it down to be like a day, because also a lot of times, again, you make good money, so if they really want your place, they may book it a few days earlier. If you tell them, you know, hey, like I do want to do this with you, but I need it booked by this day, and they might pay for a few extra days, for example.
Appreciate it, Anna. Alright, so we're going to welcome our last speaker for the first half, Sheila Williams.
I know you guys are hungry. Food is about to come. So last presentation before we can eat the best tacos in Las Vegas. Okay? Oh yes.